This is an example of what an application looks like. So a few things to highlight here. This is a consumer-facing solution, so it's a will service, as you can see. But really what I'm trying to focus your attention to here is the user experience component of creating an application. So one of the core capabilities that we provide is really helping you streamline that user experience to make these solutions that you create easy to use for your clients and your stakeholders and your colleagues. And ultimately, in any digital interaction that we help you create, user experience is really, really critical. We want to make sure that these tools are simple and easy for people to use, intuitive for them to use. You can incorporate inline assistance, so video, audio, tooltips, those sorts of things to guide the user through the process. This is an explanation video about a particular scenario that's been captured and really enhancing that user experience element. Fully configurable and customisable to the standard branding guidelines and design requirements that you might have as an organisation. Integration is one of the main, one of the key capabilities of the platform. So it might not immediately be obvious to you, but what's happening on this particular screen is that there is an identity verification step. Okay, so in this particular scenario, for this particular application, there is an integration with a platform or a program called Green ID, and it is verifying that the driver's license number and the passport information and the information that's provided to the service is legitimate. So in this case, it's essentially verifying that the person is who they say they are, and that's a requirement for this particular solution. May not be necessarily applicable to you. What may be useful to you is verification of business numbers, Australian business numbers, tax file numbers, those sorts of things. And there are similar web services which are available that can be incorporated into the interaction. So the main benefit of this is you're gathering clean data, okay? And obviously data is one of the things that I really talked about before as being valuable as part of the outcomes here. This particular application has a legal review process incorporated into the workflow. Okay, so there is a consumer-facing view and then there's also a legal-facing view. What's happening here is that there is an ability for the lawyer involved in this particular process to customise the output. Manually alter the agreement that's generated based on the user's circumstances and the information they provided. That is just how this has been implemented. Doesn't have to be the case, but ultimately you get flexibility about how you incorporate this into the workflow. And this is a requirement of this particular solution. The power of the data. So this is essentially every interaction that someone has undertaken within this application. And one of the key fundamentals of our platform is that every interaction is automatically captured. All of the management reporting, the dashboarding, the reports that you're able to create and generate through the platform are automatically created, and I'll show you the power of that in a moment. For those of you who saw Tony O'Reilly's presentation a few hours ago from KPMG, this is a solution that he referenced in his presentation that KPMG have created. So essentially, this was essentially a solution they created for one of their clients, and they've scaled to other clients. And this is helping employees of large global organisations who are needing to work in Australia, and they might need some information about the sorts of visas they need to obtain or the sorts of tax they might need to pay, how they might need to be paid, that sort of thing. So this is guiding those individuals who are in that scenario through the process, providing them the output that they need that's relevant to their circumstances. So that's really delivering value. Here is the four-step process in terms of data collection, the automation elements, the personalisation and the customisation of output, and ultimately that solution is compliant with the regulations that are applicable to that particular scenario. So this is essentially what we as an organisation help you as a legal function create. So this is the idea of a 24/7 digital advisor tool. So ultimately we're trying to help you create a suite of tools, and obviously the intention is that we start with something relatively trivial and accessible or easy to consume, but ultimately working with you to build these up over a period of time. And this is a suite of tools that is available and accessible to your colleagues, your stakeholders internally, to allow them to self-serve. And then when things need legal assistance, they're able to be routed through to get that legal assistance. So a number of use cases there that may be relevant to you, and I won't go through these now, but I'm happy to talk to any of you about those use cases if they're of interest. What I am going to talk a little bit about is compliance. So a lot of the I want to show you a quick example of something that's created from a compliance perspective. So we do a lot of risk and compliance work. One of the things that we've created with one of our clients, and this is an interesting solution because it kind of shows you some of the capabilities of the platform. So the first point to note here is this solution is integrated within a SharePoint environment. So we routinely create these applications, but ultimately we surface them in an environment where your colleagues are already operating. So we're not suggesting we're changing behaviour. What we are doing is making them available and accessible to users so that they're easy to access, easy to consume. We support single sign-on, so really accessible. So ultimately what this solution does here is goes through a question and answer triaging type process and produces these sort of outputs, which is really helpful to organisations who may not have an indication of where they sit on the compliance spectrum. So what's happening here is that you're going through a risk assessment process, and I'll just step through a few screenshots of this particular application to give you a sense of how it looks and functions. Ultimately what we're doing is creating the 3 graphics that I showed you on the screen there before. We're going through a particular questioning process about where this particular business is undertaking their operations, what sort of sales turnover they have, the number of employees, etc. So you're going through that interactive question and answer process, applying the information that's relevant to you, gathering clean data, nice user experience to make it fairly seamless and easy for people to use, etc., etc. You'll see here on this particular screen, you'll see there that it's arrived at a kind of a mid-decision point where it says that business practices, this business is undertaking practices in high and medium risk countries based on the previous information that's been provided. So based on that now, this application is going to go through and ask you some information about your interaction with government. So that interaction is streamlined based on the parameters of what the user who's completing this application has put in, and the workflow is essentially tailored to capitalise on that information. So we're not asking you questions that aren't relevant to you. It's a guided interview, as I said. So ultimately what happens at the end of that process is those graphics are produced to give an indication of where someone might sit on a risk and compliance spectrum. So that risk and compliance area is something that we spend a lot of time in. What I'm going to do now just quickly is show you some of the simplicity of how easy it is to deliver value from these applications. So this is an application which is essentially a procurement application. So you can see there's a couple of buttons at the bottom. You can add a new vendor or generate a purchase order. I'm just going to show you a couple of screens about generating the purchase order. So essentially you're going through a vendor selection process. What are the types of goods you need to acquire? Who is the organisation you need to acquire them from? Verifying this vendor information is correct. You could integrate an ABN verification process into that element there if you wanted to. Ultimately, at the end of this interaction, you're producing a purchase order. So that process is completely automated, completely streamlined based on the parameters of what's configured within the application. But what I'm going to show you now is how this incorporates. So this is the Neota Logic environment. This is the management environment where you're getting your management overlay of what's happening within the application. And what I'm going to do now is just quickly, hopefully, highlight how simple it is to create some reports that really allow you to deliver value or derive that value. So essentially all of the data that's captured and derived within these applications is available in the management portal. And what we're trying to do here is illustrate how easy to use to run a quick report on what that data entails. So in this scenario, we're trying to give you an overview of orders that are under $100 or over $100, just to highlight how quickly and easily it is. You can select your data points there in terms of total order. You add filters. So this is showing you how you can kind of add filters to kind of select and customise from all of the fields that are available in the database. Select the parameters of the search, and ultimately publish a graph or a report that's showing you what that's looking for. So ultimately, what part of the power of these applications is that all of this data is available, searchable, accessible to you as a manager. And if someone wants to ask you a question about the interaction, what's happening under the hood, how many of these things are happening, show us where the value is, show us what's happening, who's using the application, show us the information that's kind of being derived and the benefits that are being delivered. You've got full flexibility and customisation about that from a management perspective. So, this is something that we've been working on over the last 12 months, and I think really shows the power of the applications. The 24/7 Digital Advisor is a suite of applications that allows you to achieve certain outcomes, and all of this capability is there available under the hood, and that's something that we've been working on over the last year or so. So that's kind of all I had for today in terms of a quick presentation. All right, thank you. Hopefully that was useful, and enjoy the rest of your day.